The Irish NFL Show, and welcome in particular to those of you who are watching us on YouTube Live. Not that those of you who are listening to us in podcast form after the event are any less welcome, but as we sit here now, it's just over 48 hours. Let me do the maths here. 52 hours and 17 minutes. Am I right there to kick off as the Kansas City Chiefs take on the Detroit Lions in the season opener? Obviously, a very exciting time of the season. The talking is about to be done, and the time, to borrow a phrase from Dan Campbell, for the biting of kneecaps is about to get underway. And I've got to say, that's a great season opener, lads. I'm really looking forward to that. And I know we'll be talking about the games in detail closer to the time, so we won't spoil our picks or get into it too much. But it's a pretty good season opener, I have to say. There was a little bit of nervousness, I think, initially when the Lions were announced as the opening day opponent for the Chiefs. But as the offseason has gone on, I think that's looking like it's going to be a pretty spicy game.
Yeah, certainly is. Bearing in mind how so much credit the Lions have got for the offseason and how excited everybody is around this particular team. And we're going to get to it shortly in terms of who we're picking for that particular division in the NFC North. But there's so many people that are so high on the Lions, and we were fortunate to have a number of NFL media people on throughout the course of the offseason. And they all suggested this Lions team is for real. So we'll be interested to see what the picks are. And I think the game is getting even more interesting because of the nature of what's happened over the course of the last 48 hours. Andy Reid, very much, I have no idea when Chris Jones is showing up. And then obviously today, we've got the news that Travis Kelce has his potential knee injury that could rule him out of the game, which kind of brings it back to a little bit more of an even keel type of game. So, and a great one you're right, it's a great game to kick off the season.
Yeah, Travis Kelce ruining fantasy drafts across the country, I'd say, at this point in time. But yeah, as you say, we'll get into the game picks and chopping up that game and all the week one slate in detail closer to the time. Tonight, though, we're giving ourselves the last, I guess it's squeaky bum time for those of us talking heads and in the NFL commentariat and the wider fan community. We spent the off-season poring over joint practices, looking at the draft, seeing who's performing well, trying to see if we can glean any pearls from hard knocks, all of the rest of it, looking at those preseason games, overweighting on some things, probably underweighting on other things. But at the end of it all, we've all nailed our colours fairly firmly to the mast, or maybe we've blue tacked them to the mast at this point, because what we wanted to get through this evening is whether we should stick or twist. That's the title of tonight's show. Are we going to stick to our predictions, or like Chubby Checker and the Fat Boys, sorry, a lot of younger viewers and listeners are going to have to check out that particularly anachronistic pop culture references, or will we be doing the twist? So what we thought we'd do is we'll go through first of all the picks that we feel like we're most confident in. And maybe we'll start with the AFC on that one. I think we're all kind of more or less of a mind here. It's interesting how the consensus worked, at least on the divisional champions for the most part. Aiden, the only outlier there in picking the Steelers for the AFC North, which, to be fair, is a division that looks like it's on a knife edge. Colum, I'll start with you. Of those slate of picks you have for the AFC, who's your absolute banker? Who are you most confident in and not moving from under any circumstances?
I mean, there are it's quite an open, and I think, very interesting AFC, NFC as well. It's very difficult with the news that's come out of Kansas City. Had we recorded this, even last week, I'd have thought, Chris Jones is gonna, it's gonna get sorted. All the talk last week was around Veach getting it done, and then Kelce is so key, and hyperextend your knee when you're almost 34. Don't like that in any way, shape or form. I look at it and I probably, I probably think the one I'm most sure of, despite the fact that they're in the toughest division, I'm going to go with the Bengals, because I just think they are such a complete team and everything is trending in the right direction for Joe Burrow. I think defensively, they're so strong. They've kept their coordinators together. They can deal with most injuries, you would imagine. Obviously, look, if Burrow, if that lingers, then that is a huge concern. But that would go if the Chiefs lost Patrick Mahomes. That'd be the same there. I'm going to say I am most confident of the Bengals winning the division, even though I think that the AFC North is the most stacked division in the entire league.
Yeah, I hate to start off the show on a dreary note of consensus, Colin, but I'm going to roll right in behind you there. I have to say the Bengals is the pick that actually, if anything, I'm even more confident about than I was when I made it initially. I think of all of those AFC divisions, I think while the AFC North is very much the toughest on paper, they're the team that I just feel has the most to prove this year in a funny sort of a way, because they've got that window where they've got Boyd, Higgins, Jamar Chase, Burrow, all the rest of it all ready to go. They've got the two coordinators who stayed on. We were just saying last week, uniquely among the consensus Super Bowl contenders, they're the only team that's actually kept their two coordinators in harness. So they're ready for this. You know, I know we mentioned before when we were talking to Phoebe Schechter at the live show, she was talking about the buzz in Cincinnati and how the whole town is really rolling and really anticipating something special this season. Not that the last two seasons have exactly been damn squibs, but if you'd asked me 24, 48 hours ago, as you say, which team was I most confident in as far as divisional champs in the AFC, I probably would have said Kansas City, but I've definitely now gone in the direction of Cincinnati after the Travis Kelce hyperextension. We're not throwing in any twists yet, but I just want to thank Shane Brennan for saying he got the chubby checker reference. Shane's only young for as well, so I'm obviously not that away from the target demographic, which is good to hear. Brian, which of those AFC divisional champs on your board are you going to say is your absolute lock?
What's happened to you tonight? I don't get it. We're talking week in, week out about how fantastic this Chiefs team is, and as long as you have Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, you've always got a great chance. We've seen the Chiefs lose Tyreek Hill last year. We've seen them find a way to navigate an offense that still found a way to go to the Super Bowl and put up 38 points on an Eagles team and various other games throughout the course of the season. Kelce is ultimately their main man. Yeah, I get that, all that, but like Andy Reid will find another way of scheming around him if he's not available for a period of time. And Chris Jones inevitably will come back. Okay, he might miss this week. Yeah, what's the worst case? He can hold out to week 7. Again, like we spoke about this before, the Chiefs have a way of methodically going through a course of a season, don't look impressive, and then they hit the ground running come December. Let's not get carried away by a couple of things that are not going to take away from this team being thereabouts in a division that, let's not forget, they're going for 8 in a row. So I can't get away from the Chiefs. I do recognize what you're saying on the Bengals. I think, yeah, I'm picking the Bengals. I think they will win the division. I don't think it's as straightforward as many may seem, because I think there's teams in that division that have improved. The Ravens, the Browns, I think have improved, and even the Steelers, albeit I haven't picked them to go to the playoffs, as we'll probably get into when we do the wildcard picks, but it looks like they have improved greatly as well. So get the Bengals, don't get the real ultimate confidence around, because I think there's a team such as the Ravens with Lamar that can really go up against them, as we saw at the end of last season. So I'll stick with the Chiefs as my slam dunk team to win the division this year. Not a great surprise.
I'm going to give myself half an out, though, and hark back to on the last show where I said, apart from Mahomes, Kelce was the one concern I had. If there was any injury doubt over him, I'd start getting slightly worried, given how dependent they have been on him. And I think that revolving carousel, as you say, of wide receivers only works because he's been the mainstay. So like, at the same time, I hate to bet against Andy Reid scheming something up. Maybe it unlocks something new in the playbook. You know, they've been the most agile and flexible offensive team arguably we've seen in the history of the NFL. So in some ways, it's a challenge that I'm looking forward to seeing Andy Reid get his hands on and see what way he manages to figure that one out while he recovers from the hyperextension, which hopefully won't be a long absence, because let's face it, whether you love or loathe the Chiefs, and I don't think there's too many who loathe them, like you want to see the best players on the pitch and performing at their absolute peak, and he's absolutely decorated the NFL, certainly in the tight end position over the last couple of seasons. Brian, we'll stay with you then. In terms of wild card picks, which one are you most confident in, and which one are you gonna carve into stone before the season starts?
I'd be very confident in the Ravens. I think they'll bounce back this year. With Lamar now fully fit, having the contract, and we've touched on, I suppose, how aggressive they were in trying to put players around them, which Colum has continuously got frustrated over the past few years that they haven't kind of looked to kind of make sure he has enough players at his disposal. I think they've done their utmost to help him out. I think they'll bounce back. I think they were in the playoffs last year with all due respect for the quarterback, not at the level of Lamar, and still nearly pulled off the victory. And unfortunately, then kind of went and threw that particular quarterback under the bus thereafter, as if he was the cause for the reason for that particular loss. I've gone with the Browns to make the playoffs, and Colum jokes because every year I try to find a team that I think can navigate away. And last year, I went with Seattle, and people thought I was a bit off my mind at that stage. I think the Browns have done some great stuff this offseason, and it's not a popular pick because of the Deshaun Watson factor, but I think more so from a defensive standpoint, they brought in some nice additions. They brought in Jim Schwartz. Sometimes the best signing you have is, in fact, a coach as opposed to the players, and he's been tried and tested around the league. I think he will come in there and do a good job there. So I've gone with the Browns to be my ultra wildcard team and slip in as the 7th seed, but I would be very confident on the Ravens being in the playoffs again.
Colum, who's the wild card that you feel has the mostest?
For me, I think I agree with Brian that I expect the Ravens to be very strong. But I think for me, the Jets, I think, should end the longest playoff drought in the NFL. You look, Aaron Rodgers looks rejuvenated, and that, I suppose, tandem with Garrett Wilson, I think, has the potential to be absolutely phenomenal. I like the defense. The issue all last year was around the QB. The one concern is on the tackles, but I think they can get through the regular season and into the playoffs even with that line. So to me, I think for the wild card, that they would be my kind of banker in that respect. Now, though, that O-line, that's an issue come January, certainly, but we can talk about that at that point.
Yeah, I hate the way this is trending, Colin, but I'm going to have to agree with you. I think that the Jets are the team of my wildcard picks that I'd be the most confident in. I just can't see them not making the playoffs with everything they've got going for them and with everything that we've seen since Rodgers slotted in. I think that's been such an interesting trade. Obviously, so much ink expended on it in the off season, but I think because it seems to have rejuvenated both franchises, and we'll talk about the Packers a little bit later when we get to the NFC, but and it's rejuvenated Rodgers himself. I mean, I know I had made a joke on Twitter that the actor who's playing Aaron Rodgers is doing a great job in Hard Knocks because he's really taken the character in a whole new, interesting direction. He seems happy for the most part. He seems to be really getting on with his teammates. He seems to like the coaching setup and everything. I know they're very much in the honeymoon phase, and we'll wait and see what happens when they hit a bump in the road. And we've talked about it at length, the fact that they do have a tricky enough start to the schedule, but you can see the way the defense is really kind of feeling itself as well. Like they seem to be setting themselves up for what they feel is going to be a big season for them. That Wilson Rodgers connection, little enough of it as we've seen in the preseason, and preseason is only preseason, but it looks to be right on the money. And you heard Rodgers saying after that lovely toss on the final play of their drive before they pulled their starters against the Giants, first of many, bro. That's going to be the first of many. You really felt like he meant that, and that's a connection that we're going to see over and over again in the season. I don't see them necessarily winning the division. I still think the Bills are the team to beat there, and I don't think the Bills are going to be toppled. I can't see any way that the Jets are going to fall short, given them the massive upgrade they've made there. Short of Rodgers, and he is the oldest player in the league this year, short of Rodgers somehow picking up an injury, which I wouldn't be massively fearful of, given his relatively clean history and the decent offensive line he's playing behind. Brian, is there the wild card pick that you'd be locking in there?
Well, I'm actually more interested to see your take on the Dolphins, Conor, because we were quite high on the Dolphins last year, and they made the playoffs. They played a really good game against the Bills, and they seem to give the Bills probably the one. For me, like, they always seem to play the Bills so tough, and they've got a great roster. They're kind of floating under the radar. I haven't selected them. I think things will go against them, such as the nature of how competitive the Jets will be. So I was torn between the Jets and the Dolphins, but I went with the Jets because obviously what's expected, and you've obviously covered it very well there in terms of this Jets team. Yeah. But you still have two of them finding their way in, three teams from the AFC East finding their way in.
Well, I'm going to say you've kind of called me out there, and I'm going to have to, I think, throw in the first twist of the night. And I hate to abandon the Dolphins because I still like a lot of what I see. I love Mike McDaniel. I'm looking forward to seeing what he does this year. I think he's going to have a whole new bunch of schemes, and we're going to see some fun stuff from them. Really hoping Tua stays healthy, and obviously that's a big caveat in everything I expect him to do. But just, it's funny when we're going through it division by division. We talked about this off air a little bit early on. You make a pick one way. When you actually step back and look at it as it's displayed on the graphic there, and you go, I have 3 teams from the AFC East, which, as we know, or as many people will know, actually has probably the toughest schedule of any of the divisions in the league this year. That they have, according to the analytics gurus, the collection of the toughest schedules between them. I think the Jets have the number 1 toughest schedule. Again, going by the numbers and based on where last season finished up of any team in the league. And when I looked around again, you're looking at there's quite a few teams I'm overlooking there. So look, long story short, I'm going to twist on the Dolphins. I'm throwing the Ravens into the mix. I think if division is going to throw another team into the playoffs, if there's a wild card team that I would replace the Dolphins with, I think it probably has to be the Ravens.
So welcome in. Yeah, welcome in. We're all aboard. Obviously, the Ravens. Although I do think it's interesting. That some of us have the Steelers in there, and I know Shane asked the question around Kenny Pickett. I think when it comes to QBs, generally what you see is QBs tend to get named as captains, almost by default. If they don't, I think that's almost something to keep more of an eye on. I know CJ Stroud has been named as captain in year 1 for the Texans, and it's generally the case. And I go back to the fact that Tebow was that for the Broncos, but as Jim Trotter told me, Champ Bailey said how hard it was to play and to the sort of football Tebow used to play. So to me, the Pickett thing isn't it, but I think with what Mike Tomlin and the Steelers have done, I expect them to make noise this season. Yeah.
Gavin Smith throws in an interesting comment there, and it's one that had literally occurred to me almost at the same time it came in there. None of us have a second team from the AFC West making the playoffs. So we've all factored out the Broncos, even though Peyton, you would think, is a massive improvement as head coach. None of us can quite see that making the difference in seeing them going from where they were to the playoffs. We're also overlooking the Chargers. I think there's widespread lack of belief on this show with Brandon Staley is probably the reason there, unless anybody has another factor. But in some ways, it's a big statement to overlook Justin Herbert. He's someone I do expect to have a big season, and I know he'll probably be somebody who's heavily selected in various fantasy teams. Again, I wavered between them and the Ravens when I was doing my pre-show twisting. I was half thinking that I might just throw the vote of confidence behind the Chargers to make a late run and make the playoffs, but I just couldn't convince myself that they'd be the team to pick above the Ravens. I have to say. Any other twists on the wild card, lads, before we move on? Am I the only one who's wavering in his belief?
Well, sorry, Colum. Like the Chargers, for me, it's all about Brandon Staley and it's all about this defense. You're right. Like we all love Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert, and in all likelihood, with Kellen Moore there, only making this offense better. And obviously, they've done some nice things in the draft to give them another explosive wide receiver. Oh, I don't think that's going to be the problem. I think we spoke about it last week. You envisage watching great Chargers games, 34, 30, 31, 38 type of games. But ultimately, they'll come out on the wrong side of it because their defense just hasn't got to the level in which it should after 2 or 3 years of trying to correct so many different things. It'll be interesting to see if this is finding the year in which they can put this together. Myself and Owen Haley, who is a regular viewer of the show and obviously was very good to us in terms of doing the sound at our live show in Buskers on the Ball recently. He's a Chargers fan, and we've had a charity bet this year. I think I've given them that they'll win. I think I took 9 or less, and he took 10 or more. So there you are. So someone will be donating money to a good charity come January. I imagine it will be Owen. It won't be me. I'll be stunned if it's me. But anyway, here we go. Aidan, it's worth maybe discussing Aidan's because we just on the Steelers there, Connor. Aidan, obviously, he does all our fabulous graphic work. I mean, he's very high on the Steelers, but has them to win the division. Bearing in mind how competitive we just discussed with the Bengals and the Ravens.
Well, I think you can make a case for any 3 of those teams, and I know you're reasonably high on the Browns as well, even though you don't have them making the divisions or making the winning the division. You have them making the playoffs. I don't think it takes much for the Steelers to get there. And again, I've said it before and I'll say it again, you kind of nearly factor in 9 wins with Mike Tomlin, and it's how many more beyond that they get that determines whether or not you can make the case for them winning the division. I think we'll see how they go. Wide receivers have looked electric in preseason. Pickett looks to be growing and developing. They hopefully get a full healthy season out of TJ Watt. I think that's a massive difference if that goes their way this year. That health is obviously a factor for all teams. We talk about it all the time, but that was a huge loss for them, and did make a difference in how they finished up. And they still managed to come out 9-8. But yeah, I still think Ravens and Bengals are ahead of them in terms of their development curve. But I don't have them making the playoffs, but it's not a difficult argument to make, and I don't think anybody is going to be too keen to come at Aiden on that pick. We'll see how it goes.